Because not many people knew we had, black people was white.
Mm-hmm.
Very few.
Just a touch right there.
And then we got an interview of one guy, and unfortunately he's passed on now. He was one of the first black Marines
Sure
to
enough.
see
huh?
combat in the Pacific.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Yeah, they were very rare.
yep.
Okay, take and roll.
Okay. Just if you could give me your name and where you're from.
My name is Lewis S. Kahn, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia.
How long have you lived in Atlanta?
Off and on, approximately maybe 80 years.
Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. I stayed here until approximately around when I was 6 or 7 years old, which I lost my father. We used to own a drugstore over by the Clark Atlanta University Center, as we call it now, which is around Morehouse College. But during the Depression, we lost everything. My father did, and then he passed, and my grandfather took over. But during the Depression, you had no security on your money that you put in the bank. So we had no money to run anything. So my grandfather was born in Grantville, Georgia, Cayuga County. So my grandfather said, well, look like we can't survive, is what he told my mother, which I have a sister. Said, well, what do you all want to do? Say, I'm going back to the country where I was born. And I believe I can make it, rather than just eat soup every day. Because we had no food stamps. So they would bring soup and wrangle a bell. You came out with your pots and your pans, and that's what you had around lunchtime, but that was the end of that. So that's for our practice raised in the country, Cayuga County, around Grantville, Georgia. But I tell my students, which I'm still instructing real estate of the day, that I'm a country sheep and a city slick.
Tell me why you say that.
Because I have and give you some ideas about how maybe people live in the country area, we call it in the rural area. Plus I can give you some ideas what I came back and forth to the city so I could keep up with what was going on in the city, how city people live and what they did. And therefore I have ideas about both city and the country.
Tell me just a little bit about growing up back in those days.
Back in those days, naturally, we were segregated. So naturally, going back to the country, we were still segregated. So we had nothing. So my grandfather knew a person he grew up with, which was a white person named Mr. Todd. So going back to the country, we had nowhere to stay, but he knew Mr. Todd. So Mr. Todd said, well, Gus, that's what they called my grandfather, Gus On. His name was Augusta On. So I'll let you have a little one log cabinet that on one of my farms. So I just let you stay there, free or rent. Because more or less when you went to the country, if you had a farm, then you leased it out. Normally they would charge you, according to how many acres you had, by the bale of cottons. No money was exchanged in those days. Whatever you had and whatever you produced, then you gave it back to your landlord, and you was the runner, which you was the leasee, and that's how you stayed on the land. But my grandfather knew, because we had no money, so he just stayed until maybe you can get yourself adjusted, as long as you want to. So it was a one log cabinet, just one big room. So with my sister, with myself, and with my grandmother, and with my grandfather, we stayed in that one room log cabinet. Now, for to give my sister some privacy, I remember my grandmother had some quilts. So I remember her running a little string across to give my sister a little privacy, and that was her little room. And then I had a little place in the log cabinet, plus my grandfather and grandmother. Well, we stayed there approximately 2 years in that log cabinet in Grantville, Georgia.
Did you go to school during that time?
Yes, when I left Atlanta, I was in think the 5th or 6th grade. So when we got to Grantville, Georgia, the nearest school to us was what we call Moreland, Georgia. That's approximately 3 miles from where we had the little log cabinet. So we walked to school, although we had buses, but buses wasn't for the Negroes, because we were segregated. So if you wanted to get an education, you had to walk to school. But the Moreland School only went to the 5th grade. So when we finished the Moreland School, and by that time we finished the Moreland School, my grandfather then had moved to what we call Mayweather County, which are right on the border of Cayuga County. So when we moved out from Grantville, Georgia, out in that particular area, then I went to what we call the Lutherville Junior High. At that time, you went to the 8th grade. Then when I finished Lutherville Junior High, which was in Mayweather County, then Grantville had what we call the senior high. But for black people, Negroes, you only went to the 11th grade, no 12th grade. So I had 3 more grades that I want to accomplish. But where we were living, it was 5 miles from where we stayed to where I had to attend the school. So for approximately 3.5 to 4 years, I walked from where we lived to Grantville High School. And the first time I attended Grantville High School, it was a church. It wasn't a building. They had a church, and they called it Grantville High School because the high school for the whites, naturally you couldn't attend. But we had a bus that would run about a quarter of a mile away from where we lived, but I couldn't ride the bus because it was segregated. But we knew the people, my grandfather did, who drove the bus. So on some bad days, it would be cold, freezing, raining, and we used to rabbit hunt together. The people who used to drive the bus used to come and use our rabbit dogs, because we had the best rabbit dogs in the area, and so we rabbit hunted together. So they took a little chance, and when it was real bad, they said, and stopped the bus, and it was muddy, raining, whatever it is, and I could stand right on the steps of the bus. And they would say, I'm looking for nobody to say nothing. That I picked up this person or whatever it was. So I got a little break there, but most of the days I walked. And I did that for 3.5, approximately 4 years. 5 miles there. So during the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday that my grandfather would let me attend school, when I would leave, like in the wintertime in the fall, the chickens were still on the roof. People don't know about chickens used to be roosting. They didn't get up to sunup, but I was on the road walking, heading to school. When school was out around 3 or 3:30, by the time I got back home, the chickens had gone back to roost. So the only time I saw the chickens when I was going to school in the wintertime was on a Saturday or Sunday. Because other days when I left, it was dark. When I got back, it was dark. Now remember this, we had no electricity. No electricity. When I attended the school in Moreland, we had just lamps. We had pot-belly stoves, as they call them. That sometimes you had cold, you may be lucky, but you more or less went to the woods and you got wood and burned wood to try to keep warm when we had cold days. So attending Grantville my last year, they finally put up a little school there. And they called it then Grantville High School. So this is when I finished, and I was the only boy in the graduation class. And I do have documents to show where I think we had 9 or 10 students, but I was the only boy because nobody else wanted to walk. Nobody else had the desire for some reason. And then 9 times out of 10, they were staying what we called on lease farms, so they had to work. They couldn't attend school. Because if they didn't work, then the landlord would run them off the farm. because that's how you stayed. You had to work in order to stay in the shelter they provided for you, and that was your rent. And that was the way they provided for you. Some places in the rural area, they call them camps, or groups where people stayed together, and therefore you stayed on, say, a person farm, and you stayed there as long as you worked for them.
Tell me why it was so important for you to get that education.
Well, for some reason, like by being maybe growing up around the Atlanta University Center, as we call it now, I always had the desire to want to go to Morehouse. Morehouse. I could see them, over there, developing. So I guess by me being around the education center, it maybe dawned upon me, this is the way to go. And that's what maybe instilled in me, and why I pursued what I did, regardless, nobody wasn't going to turn me back. And I wasn't going to be and let no segregation of anybody keep me back. I will make my own what? Desire. And if I had the desire, I believe I could maintain it, which I was able to accomplish it.
So you did end up going to Morehouse?
No.
No?
I had the desire coming from Morehouse, around the AU Center, which we had Marge Brown, also Atlanta University. Now Clark College, that they called it then, was out from Atlanta, but now they're all in what we call the complex. Now it's Clark Atlanta University Center, as we talk about it today. But all the groups was there. Then I would always see people from the colleges. And we had the little drugstore. And so they would come in and that you get hot dogs and milkshakes and things like that. And that's how we made our living when my father had that and my grandfather. That's in. So it was just maybe the desire that I wasn't going to plow mule all my life. I wasn't going to pick cotton all my life. And that was what kept me going. And I desired, and that's what gave me that desire to continue.
And after you graduated, then what?
Now, after we graduated, at least after I graduated, by being on the boy, then my grandfather said, boy, what you want to do? We don't have no money. I said, I don't want to plow no mule. He said, I'll go get another mule, and we'll go lease what? More land. And we'll grow more cotton and corn. And he figured, what, we have more revenue, like more money. I said, no, sir. I said, I don't want to do that. He said, well, what you want to do? So he got in touch with my principal, which was Mr. Lewis at that time. I played basketball, what little we played, and I was a pretty good basketball player, that's what it said. And I could run track. Now, I developed myself running track, running rabbits. Because when I would rabbit hunt, and we only had a few shells, and they were very expensive. It cost a nickel. But a nickel now, back in those days, was like maybe $5 or $10 today. So in order to conserve my shells, then my dog would run the rabbit, and once they were running so long, the rabbit get tired, he started across the open field. I would see him come out the wood, I would outrun the rabbit and catch him. So I didn't have to use my shell. And I just take and hit his head right on a rock, or hit his head sometimes with my fist, then I had me something to eat. So that's how I got that desire. I figured I had some kind of talent. We didn't have much in high school to really offer. So my principal came and talked to my grandfather. Said, well, I figure he's a pretty good basketball player, and I know people at Fort Valley College at that time, that maybe I can get him a working scholarship. We didn't have the Hope Scholarship that you had then. Didn't have the GI Bill, which I was given after I got out the Army. We didn't have all of that. So he said, we still don't have anything. You don't have anything to wear. I said, well, whatever I have, I just take that. So I had one suitcase. So I had 2 pair of pants. I had 1 pair of Brogan shoes. I had 1 pair of dress shoes. I think I had maybe 2 sets of underwear. I don't remember having any toothbrush. We had no electricity. I don't remember having any toothpaste. I didn't even know what toothpaste. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know about nothing but soap, and we made our own soap because we weren't able to buy soap that you sell in the store. We made what you call potash soap. That's from lard off the hog. And you put potash in and you cooked it. And therefore, you had soap from that. So what I had would fit in my suitcase. So we went on to Fort Valley. And he knew people, and they asked, and they said, well, he's a pretty good student. Don't have all the facilities in the school, but I think he would do all right. They said, well, we'll give you a working scholarship. And we have 2 openings for you. Said, now one, you can help and clean up the buildings once we have the classroom facilities after the class has ended, and you can do it in the evening. Then in those days, they had what you call dining halls, that they serve food, because you can have fast food, as we have today. So they cooked the food for the students and served it in the dining room, breakfast, as they call it, lunch, and dinner. They said now he can work in the dining hall, but you have to get up before the sun, because at daybreak, we have to feed and serve the student. And maybe he doesn't want that. I said, that's what I want. They said, why you want that? I said, I've been getting up before sunrise ever since I've been big enough to know and been blind, because I had to get up and milk the cow, I had to feed the hog, I had to feed the mules to get them ready so we could go to work when the sun came up. My granddaddy said, boy, go to work. I said, that's no problem for me. Then I thought about, that's where the food is. I don't have no money. I don't have nobody send me any money. How would I have a nickel or dime to go buy anything? But I'm in the food. I'm going to have me something to eat. And I hit it just right, because I had to worry about having anything to eat. So I went to the dining room. That's where I worked. So while I was working there, my first year, her name was Miss Frambrough, which was a dietitian. She made me head waiter. She had a head waiter, but he graduated my first year. So I was just a freshman. I was punctual. I was always there, just doing what I needed to do. Stay late. She said, well, you're my head waiter. So as being head waiter, I was responsible for the whole dining room operation, along with taking care of what we call, when the president would have that guest, then I was the head waiter when the food was cooked to go to the president's house to serve the guests. And that's what I had, and that's how I got to Fort Valley.
Reading the transcript from your other interview, very interesting take on it. Tell me about when you and your friends heard about Pearl Harbor.
Well, I remember we were in what you call Old Jeans Hall on Fort Valley State College campus. It was a wooden building. It's no longer there. It was destroyed by fire. This was where the men stayed, because all those other 2 buildings were for the women, so they don't have it like you have now, cohabitation. No, you cohabitating, you was going on as we have it today. So you had only one building, Jeans Hall, and we had pot-belly stove. It had 3 levels, and we burned coal on the 3 levels. So I remember one evening, I've forgotten when it was, that we finally got the word that we was attacked by the Japanese in Pearl Harbor. And we just thought nothing of it, we just say, hey, here's another country attacking the United States. And everybody went along that normal way. And we didn't even take for granted that nothing was going to happen. But we certainly was alarmed about it. And wasn't long before we started seeing they started recruiting, and started getting people and having them come and recruiting for the Army. And that's when it dawned upon us, maybe they're coming here next, and which finally they did.
Tell me about how you got into the military.
Well, they came to Fort Valley State College, and they said, and called out all the men, and said, line up. They came from Warner Robins, and they brought the buses and trucks, because they said, we're going to get you all and take you back, or we're going to get some of you. So they notified us when they was coming to the campus, and we all had to be ready to fall out. just like we was in the army, because they was coming to recruit us. Because if you didn't, then you were put in jail. So they came to Fort Valley College at that time, and we all was there lined up. And they looked at our resume for us being, and saw, I played basketball, ran track. So more or less, that was the first one. They said, fall out. Fall out. They figured, you going. You figure you're in good shape, you're an athlete, whatever it is. But they ended up taking approximately maybe 95% of the young men off the campus and taking them to Warner Robins in order what? To recruit them and put them in the Army.
And what did you think about that?
Well, at that time it didn't dawn upon me about what it was all about. I just knew I was a U.S. citizen, and I said, hey, I'm a U.S. citizen and I'm going to fight. And they want me to fight, and that's the law. What can I do about it? If I don't do it, they say jail time. So I said, let's go. And then it didn't dawn upon me until a little later on as I started in the Army.
Tell me a little bit about your enlistment and training experiences in a segregated army.
Yes. This is where it started dawning upon me and maybe the other Negro soldiers we were recruited. And when we left Warner Robins, then we went to Fort Benning. And that's where they took us there to give us further examination and maybe to give us what we call the IQ test or other tests in order to see maybe what units they would like to maybe put us in. So when we got to Fort Benning, then naturally that's when it hit us, when we saw a lot of other white soldiers, but here we was on Fort Benning, and we went to our little segregated place they had for all blacks. Then we found out in another part of Fort Benning, here you had all the white soldiers. But when we would be going through in order for examination, then they had a line for the blacks, had a line for the whites. Even when you went to get your uniform, you had a line for the blacks, you had a line for the whites. Then that's when we started talking and said, look, what are we doing? Or, what is all this about? We getting ready now, what, to risk our lives? Or they're recruiting us to go fight for freedom, as they say, so to speak. And here we, just like outside, here we come inside, figure this is the U.S. Army, should be controlled by the federal government. Why shouldn't it be one for all and all for one? And that's when it started dawning upon us, we got a little problem here. But we figured we still had to do what we had to do, because I had no other recourse.
Tell me, if you would, about the instance with the German POWs.
That dawned upon us. We heard about it before we left Fort Benning, but you really hadn't gotten into the war, see, too much with the Germans at that time. But once they put us in the unit, which was a tank outfits, then we were sent to Fort Knox, which is in Kentucky. Fort Knox, I think, is still there. I think it's the Army Unit Training Center as of today. Last time I heard it, and where all the gold is placed. That's what I heard too. We tried to really find it, but we never could find where they placed all the gold. But we figured that's where all the gold was established and put in Fort Knox. But that was a training ground for tank units. But when we got to Fort Knox, then they had captured a lot of the German prisoners. And when we would go to the PXs, after training, whatever it is, for recreation, they had little theaters on the fort for it. Then we saw the Germans with the outfits they had given them to distinguish them from the white soldiers. Then we started asking, who are these people? And they told us these was a German prison. But they could socialize with the white GIs. But they weren't admitted to socialize with us. they could go to the PX and sit down and drink beer, do whatever they want to do with the white soldiers. Then they could attend the theaters. But we still had to go to our little segregated PX. We still had to go to our little segregated movies. And that's when it started being rebellious against some of the recruits. And we had a lot of men was sent to prison. A lot of them went, what I think, POWs, what if, POA, what, in other words, they escaped. And they was captured, so when they brought them back, they put them in prison. And this was done upon us in Fort Knox.
Tell me a little bit too about the idea of putting blacks into combat units and how you got into a tank unit.
Well, this came about, I think, and I do have documentation here, which one of the predominant Negro papers wrote an article, which Miss Eleanor Roosevelt at that time, President Roosevelt's wife, she commended us for being recruited and maybe being segregated and would have a willingness to maybe fight without being too rebellious at that time. So whoever interviewed her wrote the article and he named it Eleanor Roosevelt Niggers. And I have the documentation right here to show it, where he went on to express, and she expressed, why can't we let these Negro soldiers maybe train, which they should be capable of fighting in tanks outfits, shooting guns, and just like anybody else. So that's when they organized the tank battalion, and I became part of one called 784, 784 Tank Battalion.
At this, when they formed the tank unit and you were assigned to it, and you started training, did the camaraderie you felt with your fellow soldiers start to really make you take a pride in what you were doing, but placed within the context of that segregated military?
It gave us a little more, I say, desire, because we knew what had happened with other Negroes that were recruited, and they were placed in what we call the cooking units or transportation units, the things that maybe nobody else desired. You figure they're not capable of doing or participating in. So it said, well, they are recognizing us a little bit, that maybe we are capable if you only give us a chance. So we took it in hard and said, we're going to do it. But within that whole development of our tank outfits at that time, we were still segregated. So all the officers was white. No black person or Negro could become, in that tank outfit, a captain, a first lieutenant, a second lieutenant. Now you could become a master sergeant, or we'll call a technical sergeant. That was your highest ranking at that time. So the people who was over you, who could really control you, was still what? White, and we were still segregated to leadership. Well, we didn't let that get next to us, because here we were put in a unit, and we were going to make the best of it, and we should show, and we were going to show that we could fight and do and learn as well as anybody else. We only given a chance.
Tell me a little bit about your opinion of the officers that were placed with you.
Some, as we are having in the situation, were very good. They understood, and more or less it was amazing to me. And I can remember Captain Bertrand. I can remember his name. He was from the capital of South Carolina. I can remember that very well. So he was from the South. He was placed as captain over the units in which he was controlling So he had a desire, and he was pretty gentle. But we had other lieutenants that was in our outfit, and they gave us a hard time. And we had to take it, and we was punished a lot because what we said, and maybe they heard us say, and they took it out on us because they're saying we were violating or doing them injustice. Well, we had to go along with it. Those who they did get and had to serve time in the prison camps, whatever it is, and had to put on extra duties. And we went along with that. But overall, the captain that we had, he was pretty reasonable. Pretty reasonable. Because I figured, he said, if we had to fight and we had to back him up or back them up, then everybody had to work together. And it came out pretty good.
So you were eventually shipped with your unit over to England? And
Well, from Fort Knox, then we went to what we call camp in Louisiana. And from the camp in Louisiana, Claiborne, Camp Claiborne in Louisiana. Then we stayed there a while. Then we went all the way out then to Camp Hood, Texas. I think it's pretty close where the president stayed in that particular locale as I speak today. But Camp Hood, I think, is still there. So it's a training unit and ground for tank outfits. The land desire and the maneuverability that you did in order to train. And that's where we had our last training in Camp Hood, Texas. Now, we went along again, staying in those various little towns. Here again, we were segregated. So once they let us go to town, we had to quit thinking we was American soldiers. Well, we was Negroes. So you had to go what called what? Negro town, a black town. You couldn't be caught uptown going in another establishment. You were locked up, although you had on a soldier outfit. Before they were concerned, they were going to enforce the law. Although you training to go to fight for freedom, to make it free for everybody here to have freedom, but still it was against you. And that was really hurt us to a certain degree. Same as Camp Hood. They was give us weekends. Sometimes I used to go on because you had nowhere to go. Especially little towns, we just stayed on the camp. Did the best we could. Because nobody would, it's segregated, and we violated the law. Naturally, they're going to get the people who let you in. They had a place for you to go around and buy the back window. If you ordered something, but you couldn't go like a restaurant, you couldn't sit out and eat just what you had on your uniform. And it was really tough.
Tell me about the first time your unit, actually just you specifically with your unit, went into action.
Well, from Camp Hood, we went all the way, and then when they went to New York, naturally they took us across the Atlantic Ocean. Went on the Queen Mary. I haven't been on it since. Maybe somebody gave me a ticket and let me ride it one day. But they converted to handling what? The troops. And put as many as they could with the decks they had. So they said, we're going across on the Queen Mary. I don't know whatever it was. I know they're getting ready to ship us overseas for combat duty. Even on the Queen Mary, you were segregated. Going overseas to fight for freedom. And we was given more or less the lower docks. I didn't never been on a ship, never ought to seen one in my life. So all I know, they said, whatever dock, this way you go. And get a little bucket, whatever it is, a hatch, whatever they had for you. So you can just imagine in the bottom of that ship, the rocking. And I remember it took us 3 weeks to go across the ocean because we had to zigzag because of the U-boats. Because the Germans with the U-boat were destroying so much of our shipment, plus a lot of transportation, because they found out we were using the ships to transport soldiers, and they started targeting them with the submarines. So we hit water one day, and you come out, you had on an overcoat. 2 or 3 days you come out on deck for a little relief, then you could be in shorts, because they'd be converted back down into warm water. So I was sick, and most of us were sick. The second day for 3 weeks on that ship, because being on the bottom decks, you couldn't hold, at least I couldn't, and most of us couldn't, no food. I remember losing approximately 20 pounds and going across to England. And when we got across, I remember we got off the ship, they put us in little tents first. Then they shipped us all the way down to South Wales. Most people never heard of South Wales. Most people I talked to about England, they said, South Wales, where's that? I said, well, that's in England. Pontypridd, South Wales. I think they made a movie called How Green Is My Valley, because you got a lot of coal mines. I think they may still be digging coal from those mines down in South Wales. So that's where we relocated, and that's where we stayed, and we're going to do additional training until they shipped our equipment over for us to go for the invasion or right after the invasion on D-Day. So we stayed there approximately, 3 to 4 months till we got all of our equipment and trained. Well, when we got there, they had places for us to stay, the people in South Wales, which the government had leased out for us. But by being black or Negroes, we were fascinating to them. For some reason, they had told them that we were from Africa. Of course, in England and all over Europe, people didn't know they had black people which they had as servants. That's why Africa was in the predicament as we known here lately. Because if you look at the Africa map, it's broken up in all parts of the European countries. Who controlled them? Who controlled them? So they used those people as slaves, not only in America, in all those European countries. England had a part of it. So they looked at us as being part of coming from the apes, which they were taught. So when we got there, and the children didn't know anything about it because they were taught that. And therefore you shake their hands, or when you see them run around and you see the tail will come out. And they did it until we educated them and they came to say what we've been taught and told, it isn't true. So we stayed there a couple of weeks, and the people would come where we stayed and started inviting us to the church, inviting us to some of the fairs, and came to know us as black Negro soldiers a little better. And so we got a lot of relationship with the people there in South Wales, which made us feel real good, because we was helping them, because they was almost destroyed, and they knew that. They had to help. They didn't make them different what color you look like, because they almost conquered by the Germans. So here we came to their rescue, fighting for freedom.
Just briefly, tell me a little bit about some of the actions you saw.
All right, from South Wales that we stayed and got our equipment. Then we marched all the way to where we had the landing docks in order to go across the English Channel. Again, one of the worst experiences I've ever, and that's why maybe I don't go back now. Water, don't show me no water, because like when I see it, I get sick. At that time, which even the D-Day invasion, we were about maybe 6 to 8 weeks behind the first 2 or 3 waves of the first groups before we land. We was docked to go across the English Channel. But at that time, the English Channel was still really rough for us to see is concerned. So when we hit the boats again, the second day out, we all became ill again, seasick. Lost a lot of energy, and so forth and so on. So when we got, and we did land, our first experience when we got almost to the beaches, I remember around Omaha and other beaches, which we did land, D-Day maybe about a week or 2 or 3 weeks on, but you could see the evidence of the slaughter. You could see evidence of the landing boat torn to pieces, and you could see evidence of just the The beaches were just full of all kind of debris. We didn't see any humans floating as people. We saw remnants of where they had been buried. You could see where people were slaughtered. So when we hit the beaches and when we regrouped, then that's when we fanned out in order to make our desire and get and start the movement of branching out.
Tell me about the first time you actually ran into the enemy and were in combat.
The first time we ran at the enemy, I can't call the little towns, but maybe about 3 or 4 days after we landed, and we got with the Second Army. That was we was the support for our group, the Second Army, the 784th Tank Battalion, with the 758th, 761st, and we were what you call the light tank outfits. And our tank that we had 2 Cadillac motors in it, very powerful. So that's to penetrate. And they were running 60 and 65 miles an hour. But behind us, we had what you call the backup units with the medium tanks with the 75 guns on it. We had the little 37 millimeter. So we were what would you call the penetrating group. Go out and make contact with the enemy. Hope you make it back. If you don't, we know the enemy's out there, and then we send up the big boys because we know the Tiger tanks are there. So that's when we encountered our first enemy, was we spearheaded in the gap going, and we were heading toward Paris. Went up what we call on the right flank, following the English Channel. So we were very successful. We lost a lot of men. Naturally, we supported the infantry group. And what was so hurt me so really when I saw a movie that was made in which Mr. Steven Spielberg, and I think it was Finding Private Ryan. I think that was the name of the movie, Finding Private Ryan. Then he made, and the infantrymen who fought and had on their signal was called the Screaming Eagles. That was the group my outfit supported. And when them Germans would drop those 8.8s and shoot those guns, they had no foxhole to jump in. They jump in our tanks for support, or jump them under. We all fighting together. But I saw in the movie, I didn't see anybody that looked like me. Just like nobody was there but them. I said, please tell them to call me. Please tell them to redo it. Please tell them I got document. Please tell them I do a little more research. We was there. Finding Private Ryan, all through those little towns, supporting that group. And when they ventured off to find Private Ryan, we kept on to the right. Because that's where our unit, now we almost got to Paris. We're going to liberate Paris, they had told us. But came from high command when they found out we was a predominant black tank outfit. We got orders, don't come right, turn left, regroup, and stay on the front line. So when we got the news, we were devastated. Because we thought we were going to march down what? The Champs-Élysées. Hey, we thought we were going to celebrate a little bit. Here we had conquered, had lost a lot of men, had fought, but we were diverted away from the celebration. And to hurt us. We had a lot of young men in our outfit deserted. We never did see them anymore. We don't know where they got with the French people that stayed there, or they killed them. So we don't know. We just had to call up extra recruits in order to fulfill, because we get up in the morning, call roll call, somebody be missing. We didn't have time to go find them, because he had what? Orders what? To move on. And this what hit us again. Here we still fighting. Segregated. Here we fought, maybe get a little, what? Celebration. Nope. Diverted. And so what are we fighting for? I don't know what desire we had, what desire I had, but I say, I got a family, I got to make it back home.
With all the stuff that you went through, not only fighting the Germans, but it seems fighting your own army as well, would you say that the experiences of black soldiers in World War II pushed forward social reform at home after the war?
I think it had a great desire on maybe who maybe looked at what we had accomplished and what we went through, maybe give them a little more momentum to see, well, let's fight just a little harder because look what they have done. And I'll try to erase what we have here, this discrimination and segregation, that we're one for all for one. Now's the time, don't we, in a lot of trouble and have a lot of desire. We have shown that we are citizens of the United States. We should be treated equally. We should be given an equal opportunity. Those who can do, why not? And therefore we had the desire. And more or less we had a lot of men in our outfit, like I told you, were recruited off predominantly black. We didn't call them black universities, colleges then. We just called them Negro schools. But by having already the desire to want an education, while we wanted education, because we wanted to come back in the various communities, what? To help our other what? Brothers and sisters that was denied and was segregated, to uplift them. So it was just in us to what? To maintain that momentum, to show that maybe somebody was here somewhere along the line. So that's what gave us the desire in order to keep going. And let's make and see what's going to happen.
Tell me about how the GI Bill helped you.
In the GI Bill, I guess I'm a fortunate person, because I told you about my little scholarship I had running track, playing basketball, working in the dining room, which they don't call us to do, like the Hope Scholarship and all like that. And I worked even during the summer school. That's how I made my little extra money to buy my little books, what I need to buy, because my people had no money. And they say, you can come home if you want to, stay down there and work, which I did. We come over with my GI Bill. That gave me a little momentum. At that time, I had married and had a daughter born. My oldest daughter was born. So when I got back, my wife was still there in school. So I decided, and that time they gave it an idea that they could get us some barracks and put on the campus, and we could use our GI Bill to further our education. Which I said, well, here, that's what I've been waiting on. That's what I need. So that's what my desire was at that time, to get an education. Here I had something now, what, to go upon, to look upon, to work upon, without maybe any other assistance from my family, and have something, if I use it to the best of my ability and use it wisely, then I can make it and don't have to do what I see others doing by saying, I'm segregated, I have no desire, nobody's going to help me, and they give up, and they are hurting and was hurting at that time.
Thousands of school kids will see this exhibit and this video. What do you want to tell them about World War II, and what do you want them to remember?
Well, World War II, you can remember this. It was the United States declaring war on an enemy which they said was desirable in order they want to conquer the world as a dictatorship. It's called a different philosophy now, as we have in like Iraq. But this is what I would like for the young people to know. Regardless how you're treated, and if you live in a country, do the best you can and do what you need to do to support your country. Then come back to your country in order to see what do I need to do that I can help in order to what? Work out the evils even in my own country, or uplift it in order that everybody can have what? Freedom and have representation one-on-one. So that was my desire, and that's what I would tell the young people. Don't give up. You can make it and have your desire. You may have a little more difficult than somebody else, but look at yourself first. It's you, and only you keep you down. Only you can have a choice to go up or go down. Don't worry about what's around you because they're not going to help you too much. You got to help yourself. If you help yourself, then other people probably will come to your rescue. But you got to have the desire. And nothing is too hard for you to overcome. If you got the objective, you got the desire, and you want to do it. And you can do it if you set your mind to it. And that's what I would like to give to them as I did my education. You like for me to expound after I left Fort Valley on my GI Bill?
I'm sorry.
Would you like for me to give more explanation of how I got my other education?
Actually, I've got just a couple more questions.
All right,
Uh,
okay.
Tell me,
See, what, I'm just asking you these questions. I hope we're not on TV. But what became very fascinating, which I think the students or somebody should know, once I left Fort Valley, a predominant black college, a Negro college, how I had to get my other education and what I had to go through. Still, I'm just got through fighting for freedom. Here I came back to Georgia and the United States and was still segregated in the education system and process. And it hit me again. Here I had my GI Bill. They didn't have to give me anything. All they had to do was open up the doors, let me in, give me an opportunity to further my education. But I was denied because I still what? Was a Negro. That's how I went to Atlanta University, in which I got my master's degree on administration through my GI Bill. When I finished Fort Valley College, I applied Georgia Tech, University of Georgia. They looked at my resume, had to give what? My race, denied. Denied. Because of my race. Here I'm born in Georgia, live in Georgia, fought from Georgia for the United States, but came back. Here I had the GI Bill. Still couldn't attend the university systems for further education. So the Georgia General Assembly and the Georgia government said, this is what we'll do. In other schools you pick out that will accept you, like Atlanta University, and what we charge at Georgia Tech and University of Georgia for points, or whatever you want to call what you pay for how many units you want to take. Say, for instance, University of Georgia said it was $100 a unit. And maybe Atlanta University said it was $150. The Georgia government General Assembly would send a check to Atlanta University for the difference for me attending, just as if I was attending the University of Georgia. They would pay the difference. And that's how I finished Atlanta University. I paid just what I would have paid on the GI Bill going to Georgia Tech or University of Georgia, because the government supplemented the university and we were still segregated, which floored me again. Then after I finished university, and now we call it Atlanta University, then I had the desire to work on my doctorate degree. So I applied again. University of Georgia, Georgia Tech. Again, I made application, denied. Then the General Assembly passed a law saying any Negroes that have a desire for further education, we will pay the difference in the tuition and give you a one-way round-trip ticket by train, because you couldn't fly by plane at that time. And we pay the difference that we did here in Georgia to the university of your desire anywhere east of the Mississippi River. Not west, east. So that made me to look out, and I picked out, for some unusual reason, which my people at Atlanta University, the people, my instructor said, why not apply at Columbia University, Teachers College, because they had a good administrator program there, which we did, and they filed an application. I was accepted from Atlanta University, which I applied. They got all the coordinates together, which they said. So I attended there for 5 summers. I said, that's all right with me, because that's when we had the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Yankees. So that gave me an opportunity during the summer, after I worked and was teaching school, and also to go what? On a summer vacation, like get an education, plus what? Attend the ball game and have a vacation. So that's how I worked and got my 6-year certificate from Teachers College, Columbia University, which you call up on the Hudson. Wasn't too far from Harlem. And I'm very familiar with the Apollo Theater, because you just walk down on 8th Avenue and you're right there at the Apollo. So that's where we'll go for recreation. But that's my educational background. And more or less the people who had the desire, if they wanted to get further education, that's what they had to do.
Just 2 last questions. The first, what was the? There were, of course, a lot of effects on the United States that came out of World War II. What do you think was the greatest effect on the U.S. from World War II?
My desire from World War II, where I look back at it and what we had to overcome, and by us fighting for, we called democracy against a dictatorship. But when we came back, we had more trouble than the Germans had, for us equality and for us rights for all citizens. So I think that made our government take a different view of what we need to do in order to let the rest of the world know that if we're going to be a leader for what we said democracy, we got to change our status here. We got to see what we can do, so when we get out as leaders, do we have where we can come back and say, do you see it? Do you see our example? See how it works? And I think it had a tremendous effect. And all during the rest of our development of our government, I think each time you had an administrator in, we got just a little more rights. A little more rights until, 1968, in which my man lost his life, the Civil Rights Act, which made everybody open their eyes. What do we need? What do we need to do to be what? They said, we leaders said, this is democracy, this is how it functions, this is where it should be. And I think all that along with MLK, by him losing his life as he did, had a tremendous effect. And I hope we'll never get back in that rut again.
One last question. Why, black and white, everyone, why should future generations remember yours?
I think they should remember and always and hope, and really it starts, I said, from the family, mothers and fathers. I hope they would have the desire, regardless what you look like, what nationality. You should always say, I'm human, and we're one. You're born, and nothing gonna keep you here, regardless how you look. You going on. So they will look at that and say, why can't we live together? Why can't we be one? Why can't we treat one another right and alike? If they got that desire, then it starts in the home, number one. Starts really in the early grades. You got to instill in these children as being one as a unit. And you got to maybe let the family, mothers and fathers, whoever are in charge of these students, really come to let them know this is where it's going to be. And being principal of school, I know they wouldn't want me principal now. I know at school, because I know they wouldn't know how to take me, because even in segregated days when I was principal, I was very adamant for what design, what I need for my student, regardless who they look like, which I was segregated in teaching, but I got what I wanted from the Board of Education, because I said, I deserve it. And I think that's what should be taught now. And Everybody looks alike. Everybody is alike. Everybody should be alike. And regardless how you think, what you feel about people, nothing gonna keep you here forever. Do let me know. Please call me, and I see maybe I live to get old as Methuselah, which he said he lived to get 10,000 years old. So let me know, and I come back again.
All right. I think that'll wrap it up. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
All right. Yes, sir. All right.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Let's see.
What anything that you like to have there? I'll take-
Actually, what I'd like to do is certainly like to borrow this photograph.
What you do, you take it all. See, and just go
Okay.
through it.
Now we may not be able to exhibit all of it, but
Well, I
what we
mean,
don't,
you-
I'll just get it back to
You
you.
just take,
Where,
and you- and
where do
just-
y'all live at? You're relatively.
I'm close
He's
right here.
close.
Right.
He lives
They,
over
they,
by
they
the
here,
center.
see her, see her. She know where I am. I ain't no more.
Okay,
I ain't
yeah.
no more 15 minutes from you.
Okay.
On Parsons
You
Street.
wipe that stuff off though. You don't want to.
Wipe your makeup off.
Yeah.
All right.